All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Katie Baker, and I am here today on behalf of Americans for Contraception. We're so excited as we are celebrating the anniversary of the Griswold decision that protected first recognized a constitutional right to contraception, to be joined by so many reproductive healthcare champions on this call today. Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan, Planned Parenthood Birth and Color, as well as some incredible storytellers. And just to quickly give you a little bit of background on our organization, we formed in 2022, shortly after the Dobbs decision came out that overturned Roe v. Wade, in response to Justice Clarence Thomas's concurrence in that decision, in which he said the court should reconsider the right to contraception next. And as a result of that, we have been working since 2022 to try to pass a federal right to contraception so that in the event that the Supreme Court overturns Griswold, that we would still have at least a federal right to contraception protected in the US Code. Unfortunately, when that came to a vote in 2022, we had 195 House Republicans vote against it. It did pass the House, but didn't make it through the Senate. But we're not giving up, which is why we are here today. And, also it's a little bit of a victory tour for us as well to be talking about contraception this week, as we've also been working to pass right to contraception acts in various states. I think we've been working probably in about 10 or 12 different states to try to pass the Right to Contraception Act at the state level in the event that Congress does not act. So we have passed bills in Tennessee, in Nevada, and most recently in Virginia, which we are so excited about. So we're grateful to Lieutenant Governor Hashmi, Delegate Marcia Price, and Senator Jennifer Carroll Foy have been the champions of that legislation, which Governor Spamberger just signed. So we're happy about that, but the fight's not over, because we believe everyone should have a right to contraception, no matter what state you live in. And with that, it is my honor to turn it over to Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan. Congresswoman.
Thank you, Katie. Good morning, everyone, and thank you to Americans for Contraception for hosting this morning's call. As you heard, I'm Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan. I represent Virginia's 4th Congressional District, and before coming to Congress, was a reproductive freedom champion in the Virginia General Assembly, where I was the first member of the House of Delegates to be pregnant while in office 16 years ago, and learned firsthand how state laws, federal laws can impact the doctor-patient relationship. And so today, as we are here to mark the 61st anniversary of the Griswold versus Connecticut decision, I can think of no better way to honor the continued fight for reproductive freedom than to demand a floor vote on the Federal Right to Contraception Act. And I have officially signed the discharge petition filed by my colleague, Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher from Texas, who is sponsor of that legislation. And I call on all of my Virginia colleagues in the House to do the same. So Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas does not mince words when he asked our nation's highest court to reconsider Griswold, which would take us back more than 60 years if they overturn that decision and eliminate the federal right to contraception. They're telling us what they want to do. And Justice Thomas put that intention in writing in his concurrence in the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe versus Wade. Let's take a step back for a moment. Griswold was the first case to recognize a zone of privacy that is explicit or implicit in the Constitution. And that reasoning led to the Eisenstadt case, which expanded on Griswold. Griswold talked about the right to contraception for married couples, and the Eisenstadt case expanded that. And that ultimately led to Roe and to Lawrence versus Texas and to Obergefell. And now the Roe case has been overturned. All of these other cases, the right to contraception, the right to marry who you love, all of these other cases protecting our most fundamental freedoms, who love, who we marry, whether, when, how we become parents, what we do with our bodies, all of that case law is now on shakier ground. And it's like moving a piece of a Jenga tower. The rest of the pieces may fall if that one piece comes out. Now, thankfully, as you heard, our Commonwealth has taken the necessary steps to enshrine state level right to contraception, and our state code has the opportunity to further enshrine reproductive freedom in a constitutional amendment, which I also worked on before coming to Congress. But every American deserves the right to access to the contraception of their choice, not just every Virginian. But since taking power, House Republican leadership has failed to let this bill see the light of day. So that's why, just like we did with the release of the Epstein files, with the extension of the Affordable Care Act tax credits, with War Powers Act, and a record number of times, we're using a discharge petition as a mechanism to force a floor vote on this bill. This did win bipartisan support. This bill won bipartisan support when it came to the floor 4 years ago. So I'm here to call on every single one of my colleagues to join me in adding their names to the discharge petition, including my colleagues who voted against the Right to Contraception Act in 2022. There is still time for them to change their minds because most Americans, including strong majorities of Republicans, Democrats, and independents, support a right to contraception. And every other voter deserves to know where their representative stands on this common sense bill that would safeguard that right for everyone, no matter where you live. Would give you access to the contraception of your choice, whether it's condoms, IUDs, Plan B, or the pill. And I want to remind my Republican colleagues that for many women, contraception is a matter of life or death, and it's also health care. Let's talk about my own story. When I was in college, I had ovarian cysts. The treatment for that is the pill. And the idea that someone, whether it's a pharmacist or anybody else, could keep me from getting the treatment that my doctor said was best for me for whatever reason is appalling. But that could happen if Griswold falls. Later, I almost died giving birth to my daughter by emergency cesarean section. And my doctor made clear that getting pregnant again could put my life at risk. And so I have been on contraception, but when you reach a certain age, your needs change. And so I got the contraception that my doctor and I felt was best for me. The idea that someone could say, because they believe without scientific backing, that a particular type of contraception isn't one you should have, that is galling. But that could happen if Griswold falls. And again, for many women, myself included, contraception could be the difference between life and death. But the bottom line is, and I say this for all of my Republican colleagues who say that they support parental rights, the number one parental right should be that the decision of when, whether, and how to become a parent should be yours without government interference. And that is what the Right to Contraception Act is all about, to say no matter what Trump-appointed justices to the Supreme Court decide, every American will be able to make that decision themselves without interference from Washington or any state legislature. So I'm hopeful we are able to get yet another discharge petition through the House, and calling on all my colleagues to join me in signing it. We only need 218. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Katie.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Appreciate your leadership so much. And just to expand on a point that you made, when the Federal Right to Contraception Act was up in 2022, we did get some bipartisan support for it. We had 8 Republicans vote for it. So I think that margin's probably enough to get us over the threshold that we would need for that discharge petition. Congressman Morgan Griffith, Congressman Ben Cline, my Congressman Rob Whitman all voted against it, unfortunately, back in 2022. And Congressman John McGuire wasn't in Congress yet, but he voted against our state bill when he was in the General Assembly. But look, there's still time to turn it around. So we're calling on them today to hear us, to see the light, to come over and support this bill. And in fact, that's exactly what happened with our bill in Tennessee. The Republicans realized it was so popular and such a good idea that they couldn't really oppose it. So they stole it from our patron Gloria Johnson and made it their own. But honestly, we were just happy to get it passed. And with that, I want to go ahead and, just to keep us on time, turn it over to my colleague and friend, Kenda Dania from Birth and Color. Kenda.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Congresswoman McClellan, Americans for Contraception, and every advocate who understands that what we are talking about today is not abstract. It's urgent, it's real, and it's personal. I'm Kenda Dania, and I'm the founder and executive director for Birth and Color. We are rooted in communities across Virginia, walking with women, families, before, during, and after birth. We provide care where systems have failed, and we advocate where silence has become too comfortable for far too long. So let me be clear. We know exactly what is at stake. This is not just about a discharge position. It's about control. It's about power. And this is about whether Black women and all women have the right to make their own decisions about their own bodies. We are watching a coordinated effort to roll back access to healthcare in real time. From attacks on Medicaid to efforts to restrict contraception, the message has been consistent. And as Maya Angelou would say, when people show you who they are, you must believe them the first time. Because this is not new. We have seen in courtrooms, we've seen in state legislatures, we've seen in policies designed to chip away access piece by piece. And if we're honest, we know who will be affected the most. Let's talk about the South. 50% of Black people in this country live in Southern states. That means when access to contraception is threatened, when reproductive health care is restricted, it does not happen equally. It happens disproportionately. It lands on Black women, it lands on Black families, it lands on communities that are already navigating inequities in healthcare. This is not just a healthcare issue. This is about racial justice, economic justice, and this is a freedom issue. Americans cannot afford to wait. Thankfully, Virginia has joined other states in creating a state-level protection for right to contraception, and that effort was led by women of color. Lieutenant Governor Hashmi, Delegate Sia Price, and Senator Jennifer Carroll Foy, who understood what was at stake and chose to lead with courage. But let me be clear, state protections are not enough when federal rights are under attack. We cannot afford to wait, we cannot afford to be comfortable, and we cannot afford to be silent. This is why Birth and Color stands with Congresswoman McClellan and calling on every member of Congress, every single one, to do what is right, not as what convenient, not as what political, but what is right. Sign the petition, protect access to contraception, and stand on the side of freedom, dignity, and truth, because history will remember where you stood. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kenda. And thank you. We've been fighting for this bill. First ran it in the state bill in 2024 here in Virginia. And Kenda and Jamie have been incredible partners, speaking at all our events the whole time. So just thank you for always saying yes to this fight. And next, we'll turn it over to my colleague and friend, Jamie Lockhart from Planned Parenthood. Jamie.
Thank you so much, Katie. Good morning, everyone. As Katie just said, I'm Jamie Lockhart, Executive Director of Planned Parenthood Advocates of Virginia, and I want to thank Congresswoman McClellan and Americans for Contraception for including me. The freedom to decide if and when to grow your family and whether to use an IUD, an implant, condoms, or pills is a deeply personal one. It's a decision people deserve to make based on their own circumstances, priorities, and desires without interference from politicians whose actions are based on ideology and not evidence. It's a decision that, as we all know too well, is increasingly at risk. In the wake of the fall of Roe v. Wade, policymakers across the country are advancing measures that restrict access to essential health care, including birth control, and they're targeting trusted providers like Planned Parenthood. Last year, President Trump and Republicans in Congress passed H.R. 1, a bill which included a provision to block Medicaid recipients from using their insurance at Planned Parenthood healthcare centers. In Virginia, that has meant sharp declines in essential preventive care services like breast exams, Pap test, and HPV test. Planned Parenthood health centers play a critical role in allowing patients to access vital services, including birth control. And let's be clear, these attacks are not just and have never been just about abortion. Anti-rights groups are coming after birth control, LGBTQ plus rights, and IVF too. In Virginia, our legislators passed and our governor signed a historic package of legislation that protects our right to and expands our access to birth control of our choice on our terms. This is a bold statement showing that Virginia will not back down in the face of challenges to our freedoms. It's time for these protections to advance at the federal level too. Millions across our nation rely on birth control, not just as a means of family planning, but as essential health care. It's not a nice to have. It's necessary for people's lives and futures. I urge our members of Congress to sign this petition and move the Federal Right to Contraception Act to a vote. We do not have time to waste when it comes to protecting people's lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jamie. And just wanted to jump off of something you said, which is it's not just abortion that they're coming after, it is also contraception. And we saw that as we were fighting to pass this bill in Virginia and saw Governor Youngkin veto it twice, and some of the arguments we heard were just completely false. For example, calling contraception abortifacients, and that was the reason why some Republicans opposed it, claiming that inaccurately, I should say, claiming that IUDs and emergency contraceptives cause abortion, which is not true. And I'm going to go ahead and actually drop in the chat. There was this article in Politico. I should have linked to it in the advisory, but that just kind of lays out some of the attacks we've seen from the Trump administration on contraception and the different ways that they're coming at it, including by cutting off funding to Planned Parenthood, which is a critical source of contraception to so many women, including me. I get my contraception from one of Jamie's centers. And next, we'll turn it over to a young woman who is going to speak about the importance of contraception. Abby Garber is from Harrisonburg and also attends UVA. So Abby, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you so much, Katie, and everyone here for having me. My name is Abby Garber, and I am 21 years old. I'm originally from Rockingham County, and I'm a rising fourth year at the University of Virginia. Today, I am here demanding that my congressman, Representative Ben Cline, signs the discharge petition to force a floor vote on the bill to codify a federal right to use contraception. While I'm incredibly grateful that Virginia has enshrined this vital right, all Americans deserve the right to contraception, and Representative Ben Cline must protect his constituents and enshrine the federal right to contraception. As a young person, my future is the most precious thing to me. And while I'm not sure what that includes yet, I know that I need choices. I want to choose which job I pursue, what pet I get first, and most critically, when I start a family. But for so many of my friends, contraception goes beyond family planning. It's critical medication for PCOS, endometriosis, and so many other chronic diseases. This legislation would protect so many at a time when everyone is becoming increasingly vulnerable as Republicans continue to roll back our rights. We aren't imagining these threats. They're all too real. Justice Clarence Thomas has openly asked for the Supreme Court to look at contraception after they overturned Roe. Americans deserve this proactive legislation that will shield us from these attacks. Representative Ben Cline has no excuses left for why he won't support this legislation and stand with Americans, especially because 9 out of 10 Americans, including Republicans, Independents, and Democrats, support the right to contraception because it is fundamental. Tennessee, a very conservative state, as mentioned before, recognized this and passed their own Right to Contraception Act. Furthermore, 99% of women use it, and increasing access is critical in our very rural community. I hope Representative Ben Cline understands that young people notice his refusal to protect us in the onslaught of attacks. My future and the futures of countless other young people are at stake. I'm asking Representative Ben Cline to find the courage within himself to stand with his constituents and ensure that the right to contraception is federally enshrined once and for all by signing the discharge petition and voting in favor.
Thank you so much, Abby, for sharing your story. And I'm sorry I misspoke. You're from the county, not from Harrisonburg itself. And next, I want to turn it over. Delegate Marcia Price said something that really stuck with me that when she was speaking about the State Right to Contraception Act on the floor. And she was speaking directly to her colleagues when she said, the days before Griswold were really not that long ago, and they were in some of y'all's lifetimes. And if not in our lifetime, certainly our parents' lifetimes. So when we think, I think it's hard for some people to imagine that we could actually go back to a time before women were guaranteed a right to be able to use contraception, but it really wasn't that long ago. And that's why it's so important that we guard against going back. And I want to let our next storyteller, Penny Blue, who's from Franklin County, who can speak a little bit to that. Penny.
Thank you, Katie, for inviting me to share my story today. It was just over about a year ago. I was traveling across Virginia, speaking with women about contraception, and I realized that nearly everyone has a contraception story. And so my contraception story is about my mother and the community I grew up in, because as you said, Katie, it wasn't too long ago that contraception was actually illegal. So I grew up in Franklin County, and I am number 9 of 10 children. Here in Franklin County during that time, large families like mine were very common, and I actually know families that have from 13 to 21 children. My mother had children from the time she was 18 to 45, and these years are really considered the prime of one's life. Now, I am certain my mother loved and cherished each and every one of her children and the family that she was able to create and build with my dad. However, I personally witnessed the joy she felt as her 7 daughters grew to independent women, partially because they had the freedom to make their own reproductive choices, something that her generation was denied. So on behalf of my mother and all women across the nation, I ask my Congressman Morgan Griffith, to pass the Federal Right to Contraception Act. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, Penny. Very powerful storyteller and very powerful stories that you have. And it's just been such an honor getting to know you over these last couple of years. Next, I think we might have a couple minutes if any members of the press have questions. We're only taking questions from press. And I think we're small enough today where if you're a member of a press and you have a question, you can just unmute yourself and ask it. So I just want to leave a moment for that.
Katie, while we're waiting, can I just put a finer point on something that you said? I alluded to it in my remarks, but when you talked about how different contraception is necessary for different reasons, and you specifically talked about IUDs, like I am on an IUD because once you are over 45 and you are still of childbearing years over 45, that's safer. IUDs are safer for you. And so as someone who nearly died in childbirth because I had placenta previa and my placenta ruptured. And once you've had placenta previa, you're likely to have something similar if you get pregnant again. You know, I will die. I could very well die if I get pregnant again. And yet the idea that someone based on a non-scientific belief could say, I'm sorry, you can't have the contraception that you and your doctor think is best to save your life is appalling.
Absolutely. Definitely agree with that. And just one last call for any questions from press. Okay, with that, I just want to thank all our participants. And Congresswoman McClellan, did you have any closing thoughts you wanted to leave the group with?
Two, I mean, again, and they're very related. Your healthcare choices should be between you and your physician, period, without interference from politicians in Washington, D.C. or your state legislature. And the decision of when, whether, and how to become a parent should be yours with whoever you want to consult with, not politicians in or state legislatures. And that is what this fight is all about, reproductive freedom. The Supreme Court has already gutted access to abortion. In a lot of states, that has resulted in bans or very harsh restrictions that have caused women to die. And Clarence Thomas has made very clear that he's coming after Griswold next. He is coming after the right to contraception next. And as a result, more women could die. This is not hyperbole. We have already seen what happens when the Supreme Court inserts himself in the very private healthcare decisions that should be between a patient and their provider.
Well, thank you so much, Congresswoman, for those closing thoughts. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. And most importantly, thank you for being such a leader and signing that discharge petition. And hopefully we can force that floor vote. If anybody has any questions after the call, please feel free to follow up with me. And with that, I'll give you back your time. Thanks, everybody.